Right. Who knows what a large language model is? Hands, please. 1, 2, 3. Okay, a couple. Retrieval augmented generation. Okay, 1. And who, entirely legitimately, mind you, is actually using language models in their day job? Okay, that's more people than I thought. All right. So, this is what you are going to take away today. This talk is not designed to tell you what to do. You folks are experts in your fields. It's to dispel some of the magic aura around these systems and show you a technique that I've seen used during several high-pressured incidents. And you can also use this to get rid of a bit of the drudgery of making detections and making them work with your various data sources. We'll start with a scenario. You're a security operations center analyst who's just found out that a widely deployed system has a debug API that's unauthenticated and on by default. If it was turned on in the last month, you're going to need to know how many instances of this are affected. So you've got a few tools at your disposal. So you've got a cloud asset inventory system, but you haven't used it before. You've got some runbooks with sample queries for that system. And you've got an approved language model. If you're wondering, how do I approve a language model? Chat to me afterwards, that's a whole other thing. So, how would you start analyzing your exposure to this threat? Everyone has a different approach to this scenario. I'm aiming to equip you with another tool in your arsenal that you can use in situations like this. But before that, I will describe the building blocks of the tool. I'm glossing over a few details, but this is all a language model is. That next word completion that you've got on your smartphone's keyboard, it's a souped up version of that. Now, for another word salad. Let's say you want to make some banana bread. You're going to ask some language model service, whatever it is, how do I make banana bread? It's going to go over to some sort of database, usually a vector database, which contains cookbooks. It'll have various different recipes. And it will attempt to find you the most relevant recipes. Maybe, instead of banana bread, it's fig bread or something. And it'll return that back to whatever service you're using. And then what that service will be doing for you is it will wrap up, how do I make banana bread? For context, here's a bunch of other recipes, and send that over to the language model. And then the language model will send back something like, you'll need the following ingredients, bananas, bread, hopefully not glue. Does anybody have any questions on this? All right, we've got these new tools. Let's actually work out how badly affected we are. So for that, we're going to want to know how many systems are running the vulnerable version, and we're going to want to know how many of those were started in the last month, because that's when the API got turned on by default. So whenever you look through the runbooks, you're able to find a query for the orange vendor that has a check for vulnerable versions that was started last week. So you're easily able to change this to be the past month and the relevant version. But you're not just on orange vendor, you're also on red vendor. So how do you change it to work against both of them? You can actually use the retrieval augmented architecture without having extra databases, without having anything else, to do that conversion for you. Now for a live demo. This could go horribly wrong, but we'll risk it anyway. So in my previous role, I had a variety of excellent tools at my disposal. That's when I submitted this talk. I've changed job. I don't have those tools, so I had to build my synthetic version. So, because of that, we have a database. Please do not try and read this stuff. It's all synthetic data. The key takeaway here is that for this example, I have 205,000 simulated machines. and they are booted from 173,000 different disk images. I know, these laptops are powerful, right? Anyway, so we are not going to be able to go through by hand to find out how exposed we are to this threat. But now we need to try and open the other tab. Right, here we go. So here is a language model. It is running on this laptop here because I do not trust conference Wi-Fi to actually work in my time of need. This is running Llama 3 via a tool called OLlama and OpenWebUI. You can also use, there are loads of different tools for this. They don't really matter. It's just one example here. As you can see, it's feeling really cooperative this morning. Anyway, I have a pre-made prompt, which I'm going to attempt to use to convert the queries. And while it runs, I'm going to show you folks what it is. So this is what I was describing earlier. I'm telling it, using the data below, make me a query for the type of database that I'm using. And here's the effective version. Here's the time frame I want you to use it. Please only use fields that exist. This will not stop it making stuff up, but it does sometimes help. Please don't actually use a real vendor's name because I'm trying to avoid that in this talk because I don't know who's in the audience. And I'm telling it, here is an example SQL query for the other vendor. Please make it work with this. And then I'm telling it, here you go. Here is the SQL table of instances, and here are the fields that you have available. And the same thing for the machine images. Also, it's sometimes got a bit confused about how to do dates in SQLite. So I've included a bit of the man page of like, here, please read this. So anyway, it has now come out with a query, and we're going to try it out and see whether that works. So I go over here, I paste this in, I click run. It doesn't work because of course it doesn't. And I cannot see for the life of me what it actually is doing on screen. So I'm just going to run the SQL query that it made last night, which did work. And it did find 1,785, which is roughly the amount of synthetically generated real data that's in here. Now that I've run the gauntlet of the live demo, let's go back to my slides, which of course are nowhere to be found anymore, but that's fine. Oh, whatever. Doesn't hugely matter. The next slide is supposed to be next steps, but again, it's not showing up. While I try and fix that, who has questions that I can use to dig me out of this hole? There we go. All right. So, you've now seen this. What do I suspect some of you are going to do based off the back of this? I'm hoping that you're going to use techniques like this to create updated detections. So you're going to take your existing runbooks and go, oh, I want this slight flavor on it, particularly if you're not great at SQL like I am. As an example here, you might have detections for Mac OS, like process-based things, and you want to change them over to be Linux-based. You also might have queries for Splunk and you want them to work against your Kibana instance or vice versa. That tends to work fairly well. I'm hoping that you'll be able to use these techniques to accelerate time-pressured investigations as well. Sometimes you're just like, for Pete's sake, I can't get this join to work. And in that case, this will help you. May not get it right first time, but at least it, gets you closer to something working. You're also going to find out these tools are extremely limited. They are not all-knowing. Please don't assume that they're all-knowing. They will not understand your infrastructure. They will not know what data you have available, and they sure as heck won't know what the heck you're calling it. Give it the information detail what it can use, what you're expecting, and you're going to get much better results out of this. For example, tell it the table schemas, tell it what this stuff means. As you saw in the prompt, it didn't necessarily understand that instances and machines are synonyms in this context. But by adding that into the prompt, you can get better quality out of it. Also, language models present text with confidence, inevitably. They're a bit like your drunk uncle. Take care with them, verify what they say. The best way to use these tools is to have a human over the loop, like this, of like, get it to spit something out, you try running it, and check whether it did what you expect it to do. If it didn't, then you can refine it. If you're wanting to know some of the limitations of language models, OWASP already have a top 10, as they always do. But it is actually quite good, so have a look at that. So, just to recap, this was a toy example to show you how you can use your existing detections to make new ones, and how to quickly widen your detection coverage. With that, there's some other useful resources. This is a blog post I wrote where I go into more depth of roughly what I showed here, but using Cloud Query's datasets before they, stop being any kind of open source, which was really annoying, but there is a fork. Anyway, and using that with ChatGPT, and it will actually do the whole retrieval augmented generation thing for you rather than you doing it by hand. And on the right, if you are considering making tools involving language models, I talk through some of the architectures and pitfalls that you might encounter. With that, who has questions? Yep.
Have you considered putting a bunch of stuff into the system and prompts so that you can reduce how large prompts need to be? You put restrictions, etc., into your prompts that you put, they're repeated across all of the queries?
Just to repeat the question for the recording, the question was, rather than putting everything into the prompt, why not add it to the system prompt, which is the thing the language model gets told before your actual prompt? The performance of that depends on the model. As I said, it's essentially trying to guess the next word, and then we'll present that and then run itself again and do that over and over and over again. For some models, putting stuff into the system prompt works better. Other things, they just don't care. Some models aren't actually trained for conversations. They're just trained on text completion. So in that case, it doesn't matter if it's, you are a system that should only respond the truth, or just based on this information, tell me the truth. To the model, it's the same thing. But yeah, it's a technique that you can use, and I would recommend depending on the model, people have found things that work well for those models. And yes, putting those into system prompts is a good idea. Any other questions? All right. Yep.
Have you looked at agents in models as well, so that you can start chaining them together to generate your SQR, your Splunk SPR, your KQR, all of that?
Yes. I have looked into that one. There are some really cool pieces of research of agent and tool-based workflows where essentially you can, just checking no kids, you can do the equivalent of strapping guns to Roombas with this stuff. One example I saw at B-Sides Prague, there's a recording, I thoroughly recommend people look at it. They built essentially a dojo, which is like a simulated lab environment where you hack stuff, and they made it that humans can click buttons and hack the system, or you can just get a language model to do it. And the behavior of, people and the language models was pretty similar, and they actually generally managed to navigate their way through, including a fun incident where they didn't set the IP range right, and it was map scanning a bunch of stuff outside, and they had to quickly shut it down. But there are plenty of things there. I would recommend reading up on the limitations of this stuff. There are some really cool things that can be done, but to put it another way, For a long time, a lot of the documentation on the internet, if you search for how to unmarshal JSON in JavaScript, would just tell you to exec it. And stuff like that is in the bowels of these models. Treat them with a bit of care. But yeah, you can do some really advanced stuff with it as well, especially if you want to do it for fun. All right, time for one final question?
Yeah, if you want to try and get with I've got one more.
One more?
I could ask.
Well, if anybody wants to ask me further questions, I'm going to be about all day. Come over, ask around, especially around using models in production. I have some experience of that now. Thank you very much.